Hi, hello, how are you? Third time's the charm, I guess. This is the first 4 hours of an actual game that I'll play. The main idea is that I will discuss some mechanics, I'll see what I like, I'll see what I don't like, and usually try to give at least some constructive feedback on what could actually be changed for the game so that I like it even more. I will try to stick to my 4-hour schedule, but at that point, this is the first video, so I give it a bit more hours, and Crashlands kind of deserves it. That did not happen the way I planned it, since this is now 9 hours and 15 minutes of in-game time and I still don't know if I want to keep playing. You see the issue here? Right? The game is quite addictive. I might study the actual game design and most of the mechanics, or the fact that other weapons besides the hammer is just useless, but I'm still playing it. Okay, I'm getting ahead of myself. Let us start with some brief introduction. This is a game by a studio called Butterscotch Shenanigans. I've never heard of them before the game opening, but once I googled them I found out that they have a particular aesthetic that is present all throughout their games, and as it turns out the games might actually share some form of an interconnected universe. They also have a level sharing side-scroller with distinct mechanics. Yes, it is a Mario Maker clone, but it looks okay if you manage to be open-minded enough to stop giving games merit based on a brutally biased basic nostalgia meter. So, Crashlands is a survival isometric resource management and crafting simulator in a procedurally generated world. We can just call it Don't Starve clone, but instead of the cute, eerie Tim Burton aesthetic, we have space nonsense and jokes. Enough about the studio. In Crashlands, you are playing as a space luchador that is stranded on a planet with 3 people because of a giant noggin with a laser on its forehead aptly named Hugodoku destroyed your ship to obtain a quantum electrodongle. Having said all of that, you're actually thinking that Flux, the main character, is actually a space luchador. He isn't. He is a shipment shipping shipper from the Bureau of Shipping. Yep, that's just more nonsense. Yep, exactly. Speaking of nonsense, on Woanope, the name of the celestial body, which is your current prison, you can find Wompits, Gutterflies, Gildepi. I think that's how you're supposed to make the plural of that word. Tantrils, Wots, and Zugs. I'm pretty sure that this gave you no information whatsoever what those creatures are, besides the Gutterflies, I think. Let's try the same thing with some pictures. Wompits, Gutterflies, Gildepi, Tantrils, Wots, and Zugs.
Not great or terrible.
The gameplay is very similar to Don't Starve Together, and that seems like the modus operandi of Butterscotch Shenanigans. They do have their own original way of transferring the mechanics into their own little world in a way that does not seem completely copied over. You start the game by punching some sawgrass to create a saw via your trusty Bureau of Shipping self-sustaining survival station series S5. That's just a lot of BS. With which you can then start cutting log trees. We can also see the reason why this game has no voiceover. Okay, this review just writes itself. I can just paste the actual names of the resources of the game. Okay, I will focus. The game's progression is very thinly spread by obtaining new crafting stations to further your slow development into a literal god. At some point in time, given that you use the hammer of course, you will literally start one-shotting most small creatures. My main gripe with the design is the quest-based advancement. I have been looking for a recipe on the sawmill, the very first crafting station you build, only to find that I will be able to build the bacon wheat pot only if I find a specific NPC that is supposed to give me a side quest? I never found him to this day. I am puzzled as to why the developers have decided on a completely procedurally generated world, besides not wanting to waste time on level design. I think that the first playthrough will be way more immersive to a potential new player if there was a carefully crafted world to introduce you to what is going on. Instead of that, you're being spoon-fed different quests by the 3 people and hopefully you can piece together the correct way to progress. And no, you can't just get more resources by grinding the game, you're literally hard-locked by quests sometimes. I get it, you spent an enormous amount of time to write all of these jokes and nonsense words, but I think that would have been way better spent creating a solid first playthrough. Or maybe that is their idea. I was so frustrated that I couldn't understand where am I supposed to get that annoying recipe that I just kept on playing. Another way that the developers have avoided the problem of linearity is by introducing copious amounts of launchpads. These are little waypoints you can use to teleport without any penalty whatsoever everywhere. You can even pick your home point, even though I do not know why you would choose not to make your home on the first waypoint. Speaking of things that are useless, why do you have so many decorations? I think that they're completely pointless in such a progress-oriented single-player game. The only people who are actually using those decorations are the streamers. The appeal of decoration in Don't Starve and Don't Starve Together is that you can actually create some fortifications which in turn will prove useful when you're defending yourselves, and while you're creating a base, why not make it pretty? In Crashlands, the only purpose of the walls is to be in your way when you have to get to the 5th crafting bench that you've just created today. You can just surround your base and put a floor tile on all creature spawn points in 1 mile radius and you'll never ever see a creature lurking around again. That's it. In Don't Starve, there was a nice dynamic in which the knight is the main antagonist of the game. The knight itself is more scary just because of what might lurk out there. This is the actual scary part of Don't Starve Together. Not really that you're going to starve out, even though that's a potential problem, but the knight. In Crashlands, they thought of that and then they said, fuck it. Let's give Flux an endless torch so that then he can fight bloated glowing gutterflies in the dark. The day and night cycle affect monsters and resource spawn. Even though I never really had to watch out for that though, I just made a beeline for that objective and killed and grabbed everything regardless if it was day or night. At this point, I'm not really sure why do we even have that day and night cycle. It's just an added gimmick to introduce more content, but it fails short. Also, the mandatory night quests didn't help to sell the idea. At one point I had to go specifically during the night so that I can spy on Hugodoku. I found that specific house a while back, but I never ran into it while it was nighttime. At some point I passed through it during the night and the quest activated. Maybe it's my fault. I just expect a bit more than a slight color change and a mandatory quest line when I hear a day-night cycle. The game itself is grindy. It won't make the grind better if I have to aim my mindless clicks at a specific time. The knight is kind of like that loud kid that sits next to you in a coffee shop.
I want the regular schmegula.
It's constantly there, it's shouting, but you still have to wait 30 minutes until your meeting, and you'll have to just keep calm and carry on. It's not really something that is there. It's not something that I acknowledge. The main progress in this game comes from roaming around and exploiting the soil. Basically, you need to cut, mine, kill, fish, everything you see. Oh, fishing, so that's an interesting one. So everything in this game is made in a sense that after you have worked hard, you can get some slight optimization tool. For example, you can get a saw blade harvest grenade that will destroy everything you can cut with the initial saw blade instantly in a radius, and then you're free to harvest it immediately. You can even get a water balloon that will grow all of your plants in a moment, just so that you can then quickly blast them to pieces and harvest again. So when it comes to fishing, you have to stop all of your actions and sometimes wait up to a minute for your most efficient pull. And if your pull-out game isn't strong enough, you might miss a fish or two. The dynamic destruction of the world is paced by the fact that you need to stand idly by a pond to fish. Fishing is also the only thing that I did not really find a bomb that I can use to harvest it, which is kind of a lost opportunity for dynamite fishing in my opinion, and I'm pretty sure that this will definitely fit into the aesthetic of the game. From time to time, you will find some references that will make you think about how many other references you've missed. Bear with me there for a moment. But like for example, when I found a pyramid that was introduced to me by two Treefolk twins named Andiana and Jans. At that point, I wanted to revisit everything and look for what I've missed. I started checking all of the names of the items, but everything else seems kind of flat. We shouldn't need a deeper meaning or a reference to actually like a game, and I started taking references as more of a nuisance rather than a funny Easter egg. But I think that speaks volumes of our perception of the medium. I would have given it less time if I hadn't seen that Easter egg. I would have not continued to play it if I did not see that. Why do a simple, jokingly benign level with a boss is made that much more significant just by putting the oddly misspelled name of a popular character? It's either my own slaving out to pop culture or the fact that I have played 8 hours in-game time and far more above that, and that was the first fair challenge that I've received. As I kept on sinking hours into the game, I finally managed to beat Hugodoku, and I realized that this was just the first part of the game. I found the portal to the next region, soundly named Bog. Well, that was a big cloudy place that introduced more mechanics and felt a bit off. You have to use a throwel to pick up blue caterpillars off the ground so that you can then throw them in the mouths of some things named Jolly Chomps. When you do so, they explode. And you can harvest some more resources so that then you can build more crafting stations so that you can get more parts and then you can get more crafting stations. At that point, I started thinking which podcast I should put on before I continue playing the game. At that point, I really wanted to like the game because at least it felt genuine. This is a game that wasn't designed by a group of people in a boardroom. This is a game that some people with a small indie studio decided to make. I decided to put on the Coffee with Butterscotch podcast and felt bad about critiquing the game. Those guys seem nice and they have tried hard to make the game good. I think this game will work very well if it was a co-op multiplayer. Creating a manufacturer with a friend, giving to everyone according to their need and taking depending on their ability. Sharing those nonsense experiences with more than a single friend in an online matter would have been a killer experience. Everything is kind of better with some friends, and even though that can be said about literally anything, I do think that this game could have stood out in such an atmosphere. I like the style, I like the energy, I just think that this is not enough to sustain my interest. I don't like the grindy progression and the hard locks based on quests whose objective is somewhere in the middle of the whole recorded conversation. Look at this, look at this. This is the objective. This is the actual objective. Everything else is just a nonsensical attempt at comedy. I decided to do that mostly because there is a whole sea of games that I haven't tried because sticking to one of the 1,000 live service games, Battle Royale MOBAs and so forth, are in the mainstream eye right now. You're kind of required to play something like that. If you're chatting with some random new people that you've just met and you even begin to say that you've just played a single player game, I'm even afraid to think of what will be the reaction to that. In all fairness, the game is okay. Put on a podcast, harvest some animals, plants and resources like the colonizers we all dream to be, and just kill every boss with a hammer. Try it. Don't be attached to the single game you play every day. It will be a nice, refreshing experience that you will not or maybe will forget. But that will open the door for some new games. Go ahead. Do it. Play something else rather than Fortnite. I think I'm late for this joke. Does everyone just play Valorant now? By the way, this is the first game that ran amazingly well and perfectly optimized for my 21:9 monitor. There are $1 trillion AAA, quadruple A game studios that fail to do that. Amazing job there, Butterscotch Shenanigans. There is a like and dislike button in YouTube, so I'm pretty sure that all people know how to use it. This is the first video so far, so if you want to subscribe, you can be one of the first people who ever subscribed to that channel, so you're welcome to do that. There are no other platforms you can follow me at that point, and as you can see, I don't really even have a Patreon, so do whatever you do. You are the architect of your own demise, and thanks for watching.